Okay, we good? Hi everyone, morning. My name is Paul Wilkinson and I work at Deliveroo. So I look after all of the technology that retailers use to join the platform and to join Deliveroo and get stuff to customers really quickly. I'm going to talk this morning a little bit about how we develop really deep partnerships with retailers in order to do this and to make sure that the customers get exactly what they want and when they want as well. So strong partnerships is kind of the theme, but I'm going to talk mainly about the tech that we build in order to get the products that we've shown to customers as fast as they possibly can. I've been doing grocery kind of innovation stuff for quite a while now. I was at Tesco for 10 years in the labs team before I moved on to Amazon, where I was working on grocery shopping by voice, which none of you will have used, and that's kind of why I left Amazon, to go to Deliveroo to help build successful partnerships with grocery retailers. So there's a little bit of a history lesson here. We pioneered on-demand grocery in 2018. So that was before a little thing called COVID came along and really made it take off. We had a partnership, I think it was Co-op in the very beginning. If you think historically, Deliveroo is a restaurant delivery company, right? And restaurants are quite different to groceries and how you deliver them. Actually, Deliveroo is 10 years old this year, which makes it seem like quite a while that it's been going, but I guess compared to a lot of other companies that we work with, it's nothing. And we, at the moment, really sort of work in this small basket area. So on-demand groceries, up to about £30. And what we absolutely don't do is the big weekly shop, right? Which is kind of I guess my historical bread and butter, where we see, and this says £90 plus, but I'm sure a lot of you here know already that you've got to be spending well in excess of £100 if the retailer is going to make any money on that sort of transaction from a grocery point of view. And with all the scheduled orders and the vans and all that sort of stuff. One of the things actually they have in common is order density, and really the only way to make any of them efficient is to get the order density, but it's a topic for another day probably. So I'm going to talk about this small basket delivery. It's growing quite fast. Actually, you can see now we're at 11% of the total Deliveroo platform is groceries. So while I'm sure many of you will have actually done, big basket groceries at home over the years or used Deliveroo hopefully to order some restaurant food, chances are you haven't actually used Deliveroo to order some groceries yet. Maybe you have because you're here at an e-commerce expo, but you might not have done. But we are the fastest growing part of the business and it's really exciting. We've got obviously big plans to grow this even further. You can see here as well, this is, we started in 2018 and no one really did it. And then along came a little thing called COVID, and that really accelerated the progress of this. But even since COVID's finished, we've seen this grow and grow and grow. So we know that customer demand is there for getting, stuff delivered really quickly, and primarily groceries. One of my favorite stats recently as well is that we've overtaken Ocado in terms of the number of orders that we do a week. Obviously our basket size is nowhere near Ocado's basket size, so volume-wise, we're not really in the same sort of ballpark as them, but we now do more deliveries than they do, which is really cool. Obviously, we've got the big grocers in our sites next, but I think it might be a while until we catch up to, I think Tesco were doing 1.5 million orders a week at the peak of the pandemic. Probably dropped down to about 1.2 million orders a week now, but this is a lot of orders a week now, so it's really exciting. So partnerships, right? Deep partnerships with existing major grocers is basically how we have built this business, right? So by themselves, most of the grocers aren't going to create an on-demand delivery network, but in partnership with us, where we already have that network for restaurants, we can absolutely help them do this rapid delivery. So we've got the classic logo slide with most of our biggest brands that are on the platform at the moment across a variety of markets. Actually, the markets are really interesting that we're in. In the UK, we've got generally quite good geographic coverage. We cover a lot of the population, and we're in a lot of places. But when you look at the business outside of that, we're kind of a city business, because in cities is where the density makes the most sense, right? So in France, we have a fairly good geographic spread too. In Italy, it's kind of Milan and Rome, and then some of the bigger sort of cities you'll have heard of, like Florence. And then sort of Hong Kong, UAE, Kuwait actually is growing quite big for us at the moment as well. Singapore. So we're in a lot of big, kind of almost city nations, because that's where you get the order density, you get the restaurant and retail partner density, and you got the riders, and the whole thing works, right? You've got to have that very careful balance between, we always call it a three-sided marketplace, right? You've got customers, you've got riders, and you've got restaurant and retail partners, and you have to have that balance, but if you get that balance right, that's how you can actually turn this into a pretty reasonable business. Grocery partner sites keeps on growing. We're at about 18,000 sites now around the world. But really the volume for us comes from the big brands. If you look at like the biggest, most popular sites and brands on the platform, it's the ones you'd expect. In the UK, it is, it's Co-op, it's Sainsbury's, it's Asda, it's Waitrose, it's Morrison's. It's basically everyone apart from the ones that I used to work with, or work for. Although actually we launched Amazon Fresh on the platform just last week. So we are gradually making progress with my former employers, which is quite good. So how do we do it, I guess, is the thing that people normally ask about. And, oh, hold on, sorry. First of all, we're just going to talk about some of the improvements we've made for, we'll go back. How do we do it? So, broadly speaking, the model is that Deliveroo provides the customers as the platform. The customer logs on to the Deliveroo app, places an order, right, and we'll talk about some of the improvements we've made for that in a minute. The customer places the order and that gets sent to the store. In the store, it is usually the store's employees that do the picking. So if you're placing a Waitrose order, it gets picked by someone who works for Waitrose already, right? If you go down to the Canary Wharf site, just along one stop down the Elizabeth line, you'll see there's quite a lot of people picking the Deliveroo orders. Very popular, but it's always Waitrose people that are doing the picking. If you do it at Asda, it's Asda people and so on. So our model generally is, we own the platform for the ordering, partners do the picking using our technology, which is what I'll get onto in a minute as well, and then our rider turns up, picks up the groceries and delivers that to the customer. So that's how it gets back to the customer in the first place. So because there's so many, I guess, different points of contact along that chain, it's a bit different from a big grocer delivering their own orders, where they own the entire end-to-end journey. They own the platform, they own the picking, and they own the delivery. So it's a bit more of a close partnership is needed. And we do it in a variety of different ways with different partners as well. So like providing optionality to these partners is really important for them, because some of them will want a high level of like technical integrations and have the technology teams that are capable of dealing with that. And some partners have none of that and don't want that and just want to be able to do some stuff manually, with some spreadsheets or with a simple web login. And often that doesn't provide the best outcome for the customer at the end of the day. So what we're trying to do is move everyone down to a more integrated world. And yeah, that's what I'll talk about. First of all, we're just going to cover a couple of things that we've done for customers recently to give you an idea of how we're changing really from being a restaurant company to a grocery company, or at least having some grocery sort of thoughts. Because how you order, how a restaurant prepares a meal is very different, right? And if we go back to, if you're in a restaurant, you have this piece of kit we call it the restaurant order manager. It's like a little tablet with a receipt printer. And when an order comes through, you can print out a receipt in a restaurant, you tear it off, and you inevitably stick it on the pass. If you're in a restaurant, they're preparing stuff, they just prepare it in the order the tickets come in. Nothing is ever really out of stock. Like, when was the last time you went to a restaurant and ordered something and they said, oh, sorry, we've run out of that? Doesn't really happen. So what we've set out to is to build like an entire, I guess, a bunch of functionality that suits grocery and retail a bit better. So one of the first things we had to do was expand the range. So your typical restaurant menu probably has about 100 things on it, and even that's probably a restaurant that's got too much choice. Your typical grocery offering, big stores in Tesco, where I used to look after the range optimization for the world, we would have up to like 30,000, 40,000 products in that store, in a big like 100,000 square foot Tesco Extra. But on a restaurant platform where you kind of decided very early on that you're just going to do a few tens of things, it's quite hard to expand that range. So one of the first things we had to do was go up to 10,000 products, and this has been a real journey in terms of challenging some of the fundamental assumptions that were made when the platform was built, that restaurants would never need this sort of number of things on the menu. We even still call it the menu, right? Because it shows that still really we're a restaurant business. We now offer 10,000 products. And that came with all sorts of extra challenges, right? So you, up until recently, couldn't actually even browse categories 2 layers deep. You can only browse a single layer of categories. If you're trying to do that with 10,000 products, I think we allowed you to have 99 categories. That means there's 100 products in every category. So the whole discovery thing is quite difficult, and we've had to put a lot of effort into changing that on the platform to make it more appropriate for grocery. but you get a lot of upside in that, right? Higher basket sizes, etc. One of the other consumer innovations we've been doing is on personalization. So again, some of these things we kind of feel like we're playing catch up with some of the big grocery chains in some ways, with the introduction of things like regulars and favorites and that sort of stuff. But they're all there now and they all get used, as you would expect. Even things like search as well, we had to really make a lot better because no one really searches a restaurant menu. You might go on the Deliveroo homepage and search for burgers, but you probably don't actually search when it comes to looking inside a menu. You have a browse. So it's very different to how people shop groceries. So we've had to do a huge amount of transformation on the customer-facing side of the platform, but then we've had to back it up with improvements on the partner side as well. So the biggest thing that we've really done with our largest partners in every market is a deeper level of integration with their technology stacks. And what this usually looks like to start with is they want financial reconciliation and bits and pieces like that. So they want to be able to do the reconciliation on finance and the reconciliation on stock to make sure that the products that are on the shelf are automatically decremented off in the same way as when you go through a checkout in a store, the retailer knows that that product has been sold and then they can go on to order more of those products, etc. Things like sales-based ordering, whilst not now universal in the grocery industry, are pretty standard, and a lot of grocers expect that capability to begin with. We also allow partners to upload the product details and the prices and all that sort of stuff through an API, but that already existed for restaurants too, and if you look at the biggest restaurant partners, they expect that level. What we've really had to add for retail partners and grocers in particular is the picking and availability APIs. Like I said earlier, availability isn't usually a problem in restaurants, right? Or if it is, the waiter might come and tell you it before you even order and say, oh, by the way, this thing's out of stock. But availability in grocery stores is imperative, right? And actually, if you go back to the mid-90s, Tesco had this shopping list of things. It's number one on that was I can get what I want, right? Availability has always been crucial for grocery. And I think there's a classic Ken Morrison quote as well somewhere about you can't sell air. If you've got empty shelves, you can't sell what's on them. But the challenge that we've got is if you want to show customers 10,000 products in our app, then you have to make sure that you can tell us whether those products are available on the shelf or not. And that's quite hard. It's especially hard when, from my point of view, we work with a whole range of different partners, some of whom are better at keeping stuff in stock on the shelf than others. So we provide partners the ability to send us stock information as often as they want. Some of our partners actually send us almost real-time stock information. So as they sell that product, they'll tell us that they've sold that product and that product is no longer available for sale in that particular store. And that helps us make sure that customers, when they go on the app, can actually see what's available, they can order it, and then the chances of them getting, having to get a substitution or having to have a product missing from their order is much lower if retailers can show us what's in stock. And we get a direct correlation between the frequency of these updates as well and how good we are at actually getting products to customers. So, and it varies depending on how technologically savvy the retailer is as to whether they can send us it every minute, or a lot of retailers might send us it every day, and we have everything in between as well, 3 times a day, every hour, and so on. But that does correlate directly with how good the availability is for customers at the end of the day, whether customers actually get the products they want is massive. The other thing that we've seen increase, especially as our competitors in the marketplaces space, so Uber and Just Eat in the UK, other people around the world, as a lot of the retail strategies is now to get on all of the different platforms, right? They want as many customers as possible, they want to drive demand, they want to drive volume. So we now offer a picking API as well, and what this means is that if a partner has their own e-commerce channel, they might be on Uber or Just Eat, and they're on Deliveroo as well, then they can pick all of the orders on a single piece of software. It's quite common in the restaurant world too, where actually often it integrates with their point of sale system. But in groceries and retail, we tend to see pickers using the software that the retailer has either bought or built themselves and add on the on-demand orders into that system. Gets a whole lot of different benefits around pick speed improvements, and you can get density improvements as well. But what we've found is it's quite hard. You really have to know your own picking software and your own software stack inside out and be quite good at that in order to make that successful. We do offer it as an option for partners though. But one of the things we saw, with a combination of that being quite hard and the actual, the restaurant hardware and software that I talked about earlier being kind of not really fit for purpose. We built completely from the ground up our own picking app. So this actually is it's an Android application that lets partners on their own devices if they choose, or on devices that they can get from us too, to actually do the order picking in store. So the way this works in most partners is, everyone has devices in stores, right? Everyone has, often it's Zebra or Honeywell or one of the big manufacturers. They've got the hardware in store. They already use it for their stock takes and that sort of stuff. And most of that activity for stock takes and price changes and all the other shelf inspection jobs and things like that, most of those take part in the morning. And actually on Deliveroo, most of our orders from customers take place in the afternoon. So what we're trying to enable them is to use hardware they've already invested in and use it at different times and use it for a much better picking experience. So no longer does anybody have to tear off a little receipt, go around with a pen and tick it off, right? That really was quite Stone Age, and still is in some partners. But now they can get a modern Android app, they can swipe and they can scan the barcodes and that sort of thing. It's amazing actually in some places, in fact, and this probably is really outside the UK, the extent to which barcodes still don't yet dominate retail. I remember being in a store in New York, I think it was me last year at NRF, the second one after the pandemic, and I saw somebody putting price labels on products. It blew my mind, and this was in a very well-known American toy shop, let's call them. And they were putting individual price labels on products. So barcodes haven't taken off everywhere yet, but we now have the ability to scan barcodes. Because in the UK, I think barcode scanning was invented in the mid to early 80s. And I remember the first barcode that was scanned at a Tesco store was a stick of Wrigley's chewing gum, or maybe that was the first one in America. And barcodes have just taken over, right? We rely on barcodes now for everything. And now we've got barcodes in the app. It means that we've actually reduced the amount of times that customers get the wrong product, right? Especially flavor variants, things like crisps, that sort of stuff. You definitely get, it's quite confusing for customers, right? Never mind someone who's trying to pick these items. So we know that reduces when you can get the barcode scan in the app, which is really important. But lots of choices really for customers, for partners to do this. Hasn't come without its own challenges though, right? For some of the partners that we work with, this is the first time that they've put a third-party application onto their own hardware. So we get a lot of challenges around information security and just internal process. Often the people who run the on-demand grocery business at these large retailers, some of which will remain completely nameless, don't even know the people who run the technology in the stores teams, right? So there can be quite a lot of challenges there to make sure that they can actually work with their tech teams and their operations teams to actually get these deliveries to customers, right? And it can be quite a challenge sometimes navigating large organizations that even sometimes the internal stakeholders don't know. And there's definitely been some occasions where, people from Deliveroo who used to work at retailers have helped navigate that as well, because we maybe do know the right people for them to talk to make sure you can actually get this in customers' hands. But this has been huge for us and has really reduced the negative customer outcomes. I'm trying not to use the Deliveroo terminology for that, but we want to improve the fact that customers get what they want, when they want, etc. And this has really helped with that. It's also really helped the retailers in terms of their efficiency and their labor bills ultimately to make sure that we can pick items faster. And we've got a huge amount of improvements in the coming years where we know we can improve that even further. Yeah, and I've got improved the consumer and partner experience with fewer missing items, less rejected orders, that sort of thing. So it's been really big. The other thing that we did last year, which again is a little bit playing catch up for anyone who's familiar with the online grocery ordering space, is substitutions. So we've now built our own end-to-end substitutions platform, but where we see it working best with partners is where we actually share substitutions data between the retailers and our own platforms too. So we've built our own model for substitutions, and actually there's probably a whole other talk there really, because we actually use a large language model to do our substitutions, which is probably very different to the approach that most retailers take. Some retailers in the UK actually use people and manually curate the list, but most of them use decision tree based systems, often that are based on the same things they use for ranging decisions. So we use a large language model that does our substitution suggestions and recommendations, and then the picker always has the chance to override it as well. But that's been huge and has generated quite a lot of extra revenue for our partners, and again, it always comes back to like, what we're trying to do here is all like operational efficiency and operational improvements, but the reason we're doing it is to make sure customers always get what they want. Customers get what they ordered. Customers can't order something in the app which they're not going to get. So this has been significant for us as well to try and make sure customers can always get stuff. We do also, though, allow customers to say, we don't want that product substituted. And we also allow them to say that if a product isn't available, we can actually, we'll cancel the whole order. So I think it's not quite on the example here, but you get a lot of examples like people having a barbecue, or if someone wants to have a Sunday roast and they haven't planned that in advance, and then you go off on Morrison's or Waitrose and you order everything, and then imagine like the chicken. You're trying to do a roast dinner and the chicken isn't available. Do you really want someone to deliver some potatoes and some carrots? Like, are you going to turn that into a meal? What are you going to do? There's a lot of things I think we could do to better recover that situation, especially because if the customer's gone for like a speedy delivery for a roast chicken dinner and you can't provide the chicken, then that's a really fundamental thing. But the first thing we can do is give you a slightly different chicken, right? And that's like the very bare bones of this. But there's all sorts we can do in the future, especially because from the customer point of view, some customers are really loyal to specific brands and specific retailers, but some aren't. So we think that gives us some really interesting opportunities as well for the future about making sure they actually can get a chicken if that's really what they want. So that's been really big for us as well. And that was the main bits and pieces I was going to cover really. But I think to round off really, deep technological integration is kind of the best way, we think, to make sure customers can get what they want on marketplaces like this. It's really means that customers can actually get what they want, and if customers get what they want, they're much more likely to come back. So yeah, happy to take any questions on anything around that specifically, or anything else that we do at Deliveroo.
Hi Paul, thank you so much for the presentation. So this is Milica from Euromonitor International. I had a question around the range optimization that you were talking about. So I'm interested in how you decided on the range that you would present at Deliveroo.
Yeah, so actually retailers are primarily in control of the range that they put on Deliveroo, but we have actually started doing range reviews with them and recommending ranges and missing products and things to them using the data that we have for the platform as a whole. So we think there's lots of ways we can add value to retail partners there in that way. But ultimately it is up to them. There's some really interesting questions here though about the size of a range. Because historically, any retailer will tell you that as you increase the number of products in a range, you increase the amount of sales, but probably at the cost of operational efficiency. So when I looked after that at Tesco, it was always a really big balance between operational efficiency and actually like margin and commercial versus operational KPIs. But there are a lot of opportunities, I think, to improve that. But generally, it's the retailer is in charge of that. And they all take slightly different approaches, again, depending on how mature they are. Often in a smaller store, it's quite straightforward because you just list the whole range. But in a bigger store, if you can't or don't want to, because actually it doesn't really suit the mission, then it's like, how do you take that range curation, make sure that if you're doing customer decision trees, that you've got something at every point of the customer decision tree to make sure that that choice is there. But yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question.
Hi Phil, Ben from Shop Talk. Really interesting. Can I ask, what are you currently seeing from your shoppers in terms of speed of delivery? Like, there's been so many conversations about too quick, how quick do we need? Where's Deliveroo on that one at the moment?
So we haven't ever really gone out and said we'll do like 10-minute delivery or anything like that. And even from our own dark stores, which we've got dotted around the place, we've only ever done maybe like 20 or 30 minutes. I think what we see for groceries is that people want like quick delivery, but they don't necessarily need it like in 30 seconds time. So kind of just sticking with that like general, here, usually if you go on our platform, you get deliveries somewhere between like 20 and 40 minutes, and customers seem pretty happy with that. Oh, one more. Oh. Thank you very much, guys.